Okay.
We'll just wait a couple more minutes to let some more people come in, and then we'll get started.
Hi, everybody joining today. So we're just going to give it a couple more minutes before we kick off. Hi, so yeah, I'm just going to welcome everyone to today's session. The session today is the pedagogy behind Pearson English International Certificate with Melanie Drake. I'll just give it one more minute because there looks like there's still a lot of people coming in, but we'll kick off shortly. So welcome to everyone just joining us now. I think we'll just give it one more minute and then we'll be ready to go.
No problem.
Great. I think we're nearly ready then to start. So yeah, I'd just like to introduce you to today's presenter, Melanie Drake, and she manages the teacher training and engagement strategy of Pearson's portfolio of English language assessments. She has extensive experience within the education sector as both a teacher and a trainer, and she has experience in assessment, methodology and course design, ESOL examinations and qualification development. And her focus in recent years at Pearson has been on professional development, designing, delivering and scaling teacher training globally. So yeah, just to kind of just a little bit of housekeeping before we start. So Melanie is going to go through the presentation just shortly now, and we will be taking questions at the end of the presentation. So if you want to leave any questions that you have in the chat, and we'll be answering those at the end. And also just to mention, we'll be recording this session and it will be available on the Pearson English YouTube channel early next week. So so you'll be able to view that at a later time as well if you need. So yeah, I think we're pretty much ready to start, are we, Melanie?
Yeah, absolutely. So thanks very much, Orla, for that introduction. So yes, my name is Melanie Drake, and I'm going to be taking you through our second session in this series, especially for teachers. So it's the pedagogy behind the new Pearson English International Certificate. Hopefully you were able to tune into our first session with Jane Bledsoe. She did a fantastic job at taking you through the practicalities of the test, everything that's new and great about it, and really set the foundations. So if you weren't able to tune in, please do access that recording because it was a great session. I'm going to be jumping on ahead from what Jane started and going into a bit more detail around these brand new item types, specifically those that are new and different to the paper-based tests, and taking you through some strategies for what you can do in the classroom, and reminding you of what's there in terms of resources as well, as I know that we had a few questions about those during the last session. So let's move forward. So a really basic agenda today in terms of what we're going to be covering, but a reminder of exactly what the International Certificate is. Of course, it was formerly PTE General. We've renamed it. PTE General has been in the market as a paper-based test for some years now, I think around about 13 years or so, but now, of course, we have this brand new, faster, more convenient computer-based version of the test that we're really excited to bring to market. And for you as teachers, it's important that you're fully on board with how the test works, what these new item types are, and how to prepare your learners for it. I'll be focusing on the test format as well, because there are some key changes between the computer-based test and the paper-based. Jane mentioned this too during her session. Then we're going to dive into these new item types. There are 6 item types actually that are different from what you may be familiar with in the paper-based test. So we'll look specifically at those. Hopefully you can't hear my dog barking in the background there. Oh, look, are you hearing that? Okay. And then we're going to be finally a reminder around what our resources are there that you can download from our website already, the support that's going to be coming in the future too. So lots to look forward to. So let's dive in. All right. I'm just going to give you a very brief recap, because as I said, Jane in the previous session went into far more detail, but just to set the scene, if you are visiting this session without the recap from our first one, this is an assessment solution for 6 different levels of English proficiency. So we have all 6 levels from A1 up to C2, so 6 different levels of proficiency there. So anybody, depending on where they are in their English language journey, will be able to find a test which is going to measure their current level of English language ability. All of these 6 levels are recognized globally, and we have acceptance from universities, from employers and national education authorities in many countries around the world that students can use as evidence of their standard of English. We understand that teachers think it's absolutely key that we are providing more routes, more ways for learners to verify their level of English. Pearson EdXL is our awarding body for international certificate, and we can rest assured that we're regulated by Ofqual. So that means that any changes are not taken lightly. We have to go through a lot of rules and regulations to have this test accepted, so we can be sure that we are in very safe hands. A couple of areas or key pillars, let's say, about the new computer-based test. So this is testing real world English. So English that we can understand students are going to be using out there in the real world. We want them to be tested on the type of English that they can expect to be using, whether it's in English classes or their social settings as well. We're not just testing skills in isolation either. This test has a series of integrated tasks, okay? So this is quite frankly how we actually speak in the real world anyway. So we have item types where they are going to be perhaps reading and then doing some writing at the same time, or something where it might test their listening skills, where they have to then speak in response to something that they have heard, exactly as we would communicate in the real world. And we'll also be using international English, so making this test really appropriate for modern global universities. This means that you can expect to see instances of British English, like myself, or American English, or Australian English. So we have that real variation there. Let's take a moment to look at the test format, because as teachers, as educators, I think it's important that we get our head around this first, particularly as you'll notice now that the skills aren't tested in isolation, as I mentioned, that they are tested as integrated skills. So in part 1 of the test, we see the speaking and the listening item types. They're all there in the order that they will be tested. This is followed by an optional 10-minute break. And then in the second part, we move into the reading and the writing item types. Some of these item types, for example, describe image or short writing task. These remain the same as they are in the paper-based tests, other than the fact that they will be answered on a computer in this version. You will want to take note of the test timings though. This is a far more convenient option for test takers in many ways, because they can get it all done in under 2 hours. It will also mean a faster turnaround for their results as well. So you can see the differences there, but for the top level C1 to C2, they can do the whole test in under 2 hours. It's done in one single sitting. So there's not a separate day or a separate instance to go and do the speaking exam, for example. It's all done on the computer. Now, today, what I wanted to do is focus on these item types with you that are completely brand new to the computer-based test, that you won't have seen before. Even if you have been on our website and perhaps accessed some of our walkthrough videos or maybe the lesson plans that are there, I thought a good use of our time today would be to have a bit of a deep dive into these 6 brand new item types, so you can see what they're testing and what they look like in practice, and some activities that we can do in the classroom to work on these underlying skills. So what you'll notice there is the ones that are highlighted in yellow are those item types that are brand new and specific to the computer-based test. So they're the ones we're going to be focusing on today. In contrast, if you look at the paper-based test, for example, we have their describe image, as I mentioned, that's in the paper-based test and the computer-based test, and it won't really be any different other than how they are answering. So instead of on paper, they'll be answering on the computer. The same goes at the very bottom there for the short writing task. It's still there, but they'll just be responding on the computer instead. So you can rest assured that there are some item types that are the same, 6 in fact. So if you are familiar with the paper-based test, you're already halfway there, which I think is great news. So let's have a look then. This is the first item type. It's also an item type that we test in PT Academic as well, if you're familiar with that test. But I wanted to give you a look at what this looks like, and specifically as a teaching group, we want to be aware of what is it that's being tested, okay, which you can see at the bottom there of my screen on the right-hand side. So I've given you here an example of a question, and the screen here, the image is exactly as it will appear on the computer for the test taker as well. And read aloud is a question that we have at all levels. So all 6 versions of the test will have this, just it will be slightly different in difficulty. So what they have to do is look at this text below. Can you see we have a small body of text there starting with "this hotel is perfect for families." So what the students will be asked to do is look at the text. They're given 40 seconds to prepare, and then after they hear the beep, they simply read the text aloud in their clearest voice. So they're just reading aloud that text that they see there. So what is it testing? It's testing accurate pronunciation, first of all. So pronunciation is really key here. Fluency, and if the words are understood and repeated accurately. So it's a repetition exercise, which means that in the classroom, simply providing text and having them practice read these aloud would be just as useful as anything else. But we do want to be mindful of where we see those gaps. If we have pauses, for example, if we have full stops, if we have commas, we're not going to read that sentence without a breath. Are there instances where we can perhaps put some stress on some of the words? For example, that first sentence there, "this hotel is perfect for families with children." With children, there would be some stress. Let's go on to the next slide. Now, I've put a few tips for you here. Some of these tips have been taken from our test tips guide, which is also on our website, which is available for test takers and teachers. The classroom practice below is really just a very basic snippet to give you some ideas today. But if you go to our lesson plans, they will go into far more detail. So of course, let's look at the tips. You'll be using the 40 seconds to skim and understand that topic. And as I mentioned, thinking about breaking the text into chunks and where we can allow for some pauses, because we won't just read in a continuous stream. And we do want to think about those words that carry stress or important information, and perhaps where there is a little bit of a rise, if there's a question, a bit of a fall at the end of a sentence, exactly the way we practice speak in the real world. Some things you can do in the classroom, however, which are quick and easy to administer. For example, you could access a course book, you can find this on the internet, but selecting 6 or 7 short texts of just, a couple of sentences long, it could come from a magazine. And with your class, help them look at the punctuation and the grammar and mark those pauses and those chunks of language with a slash. And when they're reading aloud, that helps them to break up the sentence. We're quite fortunate these days that with online dictionaries, we can get them to understand the pronunciation of individual words by simply having it read aloud for them on Google. And again, yes, things like clapping your hands where there's a stress word, like for the first example that I said there, for children, that can be clapped and stressed out just to make it more obvious. So there's a lot of activities that you can do without using the item type to practice reading aloud. The second item type then. So this is testing speaking and listening, okay? Remember we talked about this idea of integrated skills that we're going to test. And the item type is called listen and repeat. And it's for all levels as well. So the learner is going to listen to a recording, and what they have to do is repeat the sentence exactly as they hear it. So the difference this time is they're not reading it, they're listening and then repeating it. But they'll only hear that sentence once. So again, let's think about at the bottom right-hand side there, what is being tested. This is really important for us as teachers to know what they're being tested upon. So it's testing their general listening comprehension, both at that word and also full sentence level. And of course, pronunciation and overall fluency as well. And if they're able to repeat accurately what they've heard. So let me just give you an example. I'm going to go ahead and click on one of these now. Are you all ready to listen?
My hands are very cold today.
My hands are very cold today. Okay, they would simply have to repeat that exactly as they heard it. So that was quite a short sentence, but you want to get your learners to think about the way that the speaker is grouping words into meaningful phrases. Are there any pauses? Are there any areas of stress? For example, my hands are very cold today. They're the key pieces of information, hands and cold. It could be my feet are very warm today. You're not necessarily expecting learners to attempt to copy the accent. They're going to have their own accent to some degree, but what is important is that they're able to pick up the intonation, the flow, and areas of stress. So as I said, they're not trying to copy the accent. We want them to speak naturally. Of course, you can access any kind of audio which might be in a course book that you might be following. I mean, for example, you could be using Wider World or Speak Out. These are correlated course books that we had for the international certificate. But if you want to mix it up a little bit, feel free to access podcasts, for example, or something on YouTube, but stopping that recording really regularly at first, so learners can have a practice at repeating the words they're hearing. At the beginning, until they get used to this, you might be stopping it after every 3 or 4 words. That's absolutely fine. And then you can start building up to longer stretches of language. And where you can, again, think about using recordings with speakers of different accents if possible. Websites, free websites like talkenglish.com or listenaminute.com will provide you with a vast array of audio that you can use in your lessons if you want to switch it up a little bit. And of course, making sure that they're accessing films, watching series as well. All of this is helpful in getting them to get more practice with their audiolingual skills and sort of understanding how different words merge into each other and really being able to replicate what they hear. Okay, just checking the time here. This time, again, a completely new item type. Everything we're looking at here is not on the paper-based test. This item, all levels will be tested on this, integrates listening and speaking skills. So something that we do all the time when we're interacting, and it's called listening to the conversation, quite simply. So learners are going to listen to a conversation that I'm about to play for you, and they're asked to give a short, simple answer to the question that's asked. So we don't know what the question is going to be. So this is why you have to listen really carefully. And it's testing, of course, listening comprehension, this real close listening, active listening, the accuracy of the comprehension of the learner. Okay, so again, the more listening practice you can give them, the better. I'm going to ask you now to really listen to this recording. And actually what I would recommend is that you take some notes here. Something that's important to remember is that you won't be taking, or the test takers won't be taking handwritten notes for this test, but what they will be using is an online notepad. Now, I appreciate within your classes that you might not be using computers, so it's absolutely fine to have your learners practice taking online notes. Taking written notes in the classroom first, as long as they're aware that they're not taking a pen and paper into the computer-based test, okay? I would recommend that you go ahead and take a few notes, because that will make it easier for you to answer the questions. Perhaps not this one, but what we do later. So just making you aware that if you want to take some notes when we're listening, I recommend it. So let's hear the recording. It's just one question we have to answer.
Hello, do you sell envelopes? I need to post this letter.
We do, yes. Do you need any stamps as well?
Thanks, but I've already got one.
What does the woman want to buy?
So I'm going to put you all on the spot here. I hope you were listening. You may have taken some notes if you took my advice. What does the woman want to buy? I'll ask you to put an idea or two in the chat box. We don't have a load of time, so I'm just going to give it 15 seconds or so. Have you got any answers there in the chat box, Orla? And Orla, I think you might have been on mute earlier.
Yeah, we have a couple correct answers coming in. Let me just see. We've a couple envelopes is the correct answer.
There we go. So, fantastic,
well
fantastic.
Everyone, there's a couple that we have. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Orla. I'd say there you go. You had a flavour there of having a go at that item type. We're going to do a couple more in a moment too. But generally, think about some basic tips that you can give your learners, and do access our test tips guide as well, because it's in a PowerPoint format and you could present this at one of your first lessons. But you want your learners to be thinking about that general flow of ideas and writing some of those down. They don't need to get, too bogged down about individual words. Do take short notes of keywords as you listen. I will be completely honest that my memory is not fantastic. I absolutely have to rely upon my note-taking skills, which have now become very accurate because it's something that I know that I really need. The question word, remember they're going to be asked one question here. So what is that question word? What's the verb? Is it who, what, how, for example? That way, even if they didn't hear everything, that's another helping hand there. And a short, simple answer is enough. In this case, they can just say envelopes. They don't have to give a full sentence. Keep it short and simple. All you're looking for is the correct answer. One word in this case is enough. This is really all about accessing recordings. Any dialogue recording from the web or a course book would work for this. As an extension exercise, though, have learners create their own questions to the dialogue that you give them. You can come up with your own questions as well. But any dialogue practice with some questions, it is perfect practice for this item type. All right, let's have a look at the passage comprehension question. This is for levels A1 and A2, because here they're accessing some images. They don't need to say anything. So remember, this is just for A1 and A2, but they're going to listen to a story. I'm going to play this for you. And then they will hear 3 individual questions, but rather than giving a verbal response, they look at pictures and they have to choose the answer based on one of the 3 pictures they see. So I'll take you through this so you can see what it looks like. And remember, again, of course, we're testing listening comprehension and their understanding of a short passage. So get your pen and paper ready if you want to take a few notes. And I'm going to play for you the quick recording. Here we go.
Anna was good at languages, especially English. Her dream was to travel, but she didn't have the money. A friend suggested she could become an English teacher. Anna agreed. Now she travels and makes money at the same time.
Okay. Now I'm going to play the first question. You're going to choose one of these images here as the answer. And as you can imagine, what the learner will be doing is clicking on the screen on the image that they want to submit as their answer. So,
what did Anna want to do?
So well, I won't get you to put them in the chat box this time. But what she wanted to do was travel. Hopefully you would have got. So they would click the first image here. Let's go to the next one. Listen carefully.
What was Anna's problem?
So the problem was that she had no money. So they would be clicking the last picture there at the end. And then finally,
what does Anna do now?
And she now teaches English. So that's going to be that middle image there. So hopefully you were all successful in that. You would have noticed that there's quite a few areas where they try to trick you, as is often the case, or a few words that are put in there that you think could be the answer, but they're related to something else. So this is why I say take notes. Remind your students to take notes, because I think we can't underestimate when we're a little bit nervous and we're under pressure how helpful these are, especially when your mind is racing a little bit. Let's have a look at how the passage comprehension differs for levels B1 and above. So again, they're going to listen to a story, but when we get these 3 questions, you're going to answer in turn. So you're giving a verbal spoken response. You don't have the images this time. And it's testing the same thing. It's general listening comprehension and their understanding of a short passage. So again, get your notes ready and your pen and paper, and let's get ready to listen.
Pauline went to the theater with her sister to see a musical called Bright Lights. In the interval, they went to buy ice cream, and while they were standing in the queue, they heard someone say, "Hello, Pauline." It was an old school friend who Pauline hadn't seen for a very long time. Pauline was very happy to see her.
All right. So I'd guess this would probably be about a level B1, I would say, just as a guess. Let's have a go at the question.
Who went to the theatre with Pauline?
So who went to the theatre with Pauline? And remember, just a few words or a very short sentence will suffice here. The answer was her sister. Do the next one.
Why were they standing in a queue?
Now, I'm sure you all got this, but why were they standing in a queue? It was because they were buying ice cream. And the last question.
Who did Pauline meet at the theatre?
So who did Pauline meet at the theatre? It was, of course, her old school friend. So here you could just say her old school friend, or she met her old school friend. That's perfect, that is enough. It's just the answer. You don't need to be giving long, elaborate responses here. So a few tips here. Again, it's this idea of making sure that they understand the general flow of ideas and not to get too worried about individual words, because let's face it, depending on the level, or regardless of the level, I would say, there will be some words here and there that they might not know, and that's okay. It's about understanding the general topic. So practicing taking short notes. Give them lots of practice of taking notes and being able to understand what they've written. Keywords again for the question. The question is really important. They may have understood everything, but if they then didn't understand the question or can't respond, that's a bit of an issue. So give them lots of practice with responding to questions as well, and you can create your own. For the lower levels, A1 to A2, remember that they should be keeping their eyes hovering over these pictures when they're listening for that question. You don't want their eyes to be anywhere else on the pictures. And as we said, a short, simple response, it's satisfactory. So again, as well as using the content we provide you with in the lesson plans, and you can source any dialogue from the web or from course books and create your own questions in class. And as extensions, get the learners really involved if you want to push them, and get them to practice having a go, creating their own questions, working in partners, and testing each other. And of course, for the younger learners, this is going to be a bit more about getting them practicing listening and connecting what they hear with images. So wherever you can source some additional images, of course, it can be from the internet, or in most cases from course books that you may well be using. Okay, this is probably one of my favorite ones. It's called Listen and Read, Hotspot. So it's obviously testing our ability to listen and read at the same time. And we have this for all 6 versions of the test. So what happens here is that we're going to listen to a recording, okay? As we're listening, the learners need to click on any of the words in the text that are different to what they hear. So I actually find this quite good fun. I actually think out of all the item types, this is maybe the one I like most. So you're testing your learners' reading and listening comprehension and their ability to recognize individual words in a text. Let's have a go. I'm going to play the recording. It's really important when you're on the computer that you use your cursor to follow the words. I appreciate you can't do that today, but you might want to use your hand or your pencil and just follow the words this way. Either keep in your mind or make a note of any words that you hear that are different, okay?
Green Hill Park is open early until late every day of the year, including public holidays. Opening hours are clearly shown at the main entrances. Music is played 15 minutes before the park is closed. Please note, you may not enter the park outside opening hours.
Yeah, so what you will notice there is that the words that are different, they kind of come from the same word families, right? So they might be a word that is just a synonym, it could be an antonym, a word that's completely opposite, but they generally have some sort of link or similarity in meaning. So for example, I think we had, instead of before the park is shut, we had closed. Instead of national, we had public holidays. Instead of until night, I think, late, I think, I forget now, I haven't written them all down. But anyway, it's fairly simple to do, but what you will notice that there's always a link between these words so that they could grammatically work anyway, but they're just giving you another variety of that word. So you do have to listen really, really carefully. Let's have a look at a few tips here. So you have got 10 seconds before the recording begins, and this is really, really important to use it because you want to have a quick skim of that transcript just to familiarize yourself with the topic, because that way you can make a few predictions about what's going to come. The cursor moving along with the words and the speed of the words is super important, because that way you can follow each word and the pace of the speaker, and make sure you keep up with them. That way it's easier to hit on something when you hear a different word. I like to think about how each word is going to sound. And as soon as I hear a different word, so I'm kind of actively reading it out as I'm listening, as soon as you hear a different word, you just click on it. Again, what this is really about is developing their ability to understand lengthier stretches of discourse. So whether you can use more podcasts or recordings that show a range of accents, helping them to become familiar with the pronunciation of words, word stress, sort of the intricacies of spoken language and how some of the words blend into each other. Again, this could be done from listening to TV shows, series as well. Loads of practice with new dialogues. And what you can often do as well, whether you're using podcasts or whether, particularly if you're using course books, provide those transcripts to follow. Give them the audio scripts to whatever listening material you're giving your students. That way you can really, really pull out those noticing skills about, the final sounds of words, how one word will link into the first sound of the next word, all those features of connected speech. The best way to pull that out and really put focus on it is to provide the audio script as well. All right, we're nearly there. How are we doing for time? Great. This is a very important item type actually, because it needs some explicit instruction in the classroom. So we're testing the ability to read and write. So we've called it read and then write. So what has been asked here? The learners are going to read the passage that you can see starts with Mary loves to take photographs. Now there's a whole passage here. After 30 seconds, in this particular case, the passage is going to disappear. In fact, it will always disappear after 30 seconds, regardless of level. And then you'll rewrite the passage in your own words. Now, in this case, there's 90 seconds to write your answer. I think you maybe get 120 for the higher levels. What's important here, though, is that we're not memorizing anything. The idea is not to memorize. And so as a result, you're not able to use the online notepad here. It's the only item type where you can't use the online notepad. But remember that this is testing overall reading comprehension. So make sure that you have your learners reading as much as possible. Sounds obvious, but it's true. And it's testing their ability to write accurately as well, understand sentence structure, the order of words and how words connect. So a few tips here, okay? So just remember that after 30 seconds, the passage disappears and they're rewriting it in their own words, not exactly as it appears here. So a few pointers. The easiest way I like to think of this is that when the text disappears, before the text disappears, actually make sure that they're really using that time fruitfully, that they've read the text, they understand the main idea of what's happening, and the narrative structure. So if you try to split it into a beginning and a middle and an end, if after that 30 seconds we have a sense of what has happened at the beginning and the middle and the end, that is probably enough to be able to retell the story in your own words. And really what we're trying to get them to do, and we will need to practice this in the classroom a fair bit, is to summarize the main idea, but then condense some of those essential supporting ideas as well. As always, if they have time, you want them to check their response grammatically before they send it, but it's really important you let them know that the online notepad is not permitted for this item type, because we don't want them to just simply memorize it. They're looking, we don't want them to, respond word for word. We want them to understand the gist, that narrative structure and some of the supporting ideas, and rewrite it in their own way. So you will want to practice this in class without having them take those notes. So again, the lesson plans will go into way more detail and elaborate detail around a lesson that you can deliver on this, but just some key pointers here, that we need to be providing them with short pieces, paragraphs or a few sentences long, where they can practice having a skim for the general topic. And then, you can take your time with this initially, but looking for that narrative structure and those details, and have them work in pairs if necessary at first to write a summary of this in their own words. 2 or 3 short texts will work, and practice summarizing them one after another, eventually timed once you get to that place, because remember, they're either going to have 90 seconds or 120 seconds to do it, depending on the level. So you need to make sure that they can do this within a short window. A few points to remember, okay, so if we think about in general transferable skills, so this could be this sort of close reading skills we've spoken about, or being able to communicate quite concisely. Any of these skills that we've spoken about across today, like active listening, listening for gist, this is applicable for the learner. So everything that you're supporting them to do when they're working on these item types are skills that they're going to use way past the study time for this test. They'll be using this in their future study, whatever they go on to do next in their professional lives. And I think for teachers as well, even if you're just teaching predominantly, whether it's general English classes or young learners, or whether you're teaching for other tests, all of these skills here are going to be applicable in your other lessons. So bear that in mind. And of course, if you're starting to find that motivation is starting to drop a little bit, always be mindful of reminding them of everything that they're learning in this preparation journey. I have never seen an example of a student who's undertaken an English proficiency test not have benefited tenfold afterwards when they realize how much more competent and confident they are in communicating in English with native speakers. And hopefully you will actually find that you learn a lot in this test preparation journey as well, because test prep is slightly different to the journey that we have with general English preparation classes, given the time constraints and the sort of high stakes nature of it. So I think you should find that you learn a lot too. I wanted to mention as well, though, that study skills, they're not generally acquired instinctively in our learners. So it's something that we want to be very mindful of as educators in the classroom. So note-taking skills, for example. Note-taking skills is one example of a study skill, which is absolutely crucial to success in a test like the International Certificate. And they may well be able to take notes, but are they able to take accurate notes quickly under time constraints? If they can't make sense of the notes they've made, they're not going to be able to answer the question accurately. So make sure that you spend time developing these skills. Can they come up with their own sort of shorthand that makes sense to them? Because it only needs to be able to make sense to them. Same thing with preparing to write an essay. The structure of that, they need to be given those tools. And again, our lesson plans will help you with that, but don't expect them to have these skills sort of already under their belt. You need to allow some time in the classroom to develop them. And of course, linked to this is time management. With these tests, if you bear in mind that they're quite quick, the whole thing will be done in under 2 hours. They need to move through the questions relatively quickly. They're always on a timer. And so you need to make sure in the classrooms that you're not just working on developing these skills, period. You're actually making sure that they can answer these questions under the time constraints as well. And you can work on this once you have, the skills sort of more developed, but make sure that the time management is something that you're building into your test prep lessons. All right, a little bit about the resources and support, and then we'll go into some questions if you have any. Jane mentioned this, I'm going to mention it again, and I think we'll put the link there for you as well on our website. There is a teacher's familiarization guide. This has an awful lot of information around the practicalities functionalities of the test, most of the sort of key things that you need to know, I would really recommend that you access that, download it, and go through the material so you feel that you understand the main differences between the paper-based and the computer-based test and how we're going to roll this out. There's a range of video material as well to support you. For example, remote proctoring and the in-center test experience for your own understanding, and also so you're in a position to speak to your test takers about this. In fact, the next session with Carmen is on remote proctoring, so please be sure to join that. I mentioned as well the test tips guide in presentation format that you may want to access. It's quite a nice presentation that you could use perhaps in one of your early sessions with your learners if they're going to be taking the test, because it will take you through each item type with some sort of basic test tips for the learner. Just gives them some key ideas to think about in terms of approaching the task. We also have these videos, item type videos on our YouTube channel as well. Again, it's something that you might want to use for yourself or that you can use in your classes just to make sure that they're really seeing what these items look like in practice. And let's not forget the test preparation ecosystem of products that we do have for test takers. Now, the online readiness test, if you didn't tune into Jane's session, this is something at the moment that we have for free for teachers to try out as well. You just need to get in touch via our international certificate at pearson.com. Email address, please go ahead and try that, because it will give you the experience of taking the test. You'll get a score report at the end, and it really just puts you in the driver's seat. But what is great about this is it means you have the opportunity to really understand how ready your learners are. Are they nearly ready? Are they very much ready to go on that traffic light system? So it's something you could do at the beginning of the course, midway, at the very end. It's entirely up to you, but it is there. And I mention it again because I really want you to take it. We, of course, have the warm-up app as well, which is completely free to download, which means that you can be sure your learners are having the opportunity to get additional specific item type practice outside the classroom as well. So this is something that they can do to make sure that they're getting additional practice out with whatever you have been doing with them activities wise in the classroom. And then of course we'll have the question bank, which is going to be available very shortly too. So there's quite a lot there that you can signpost to your test takers so you can be sure that they're getting the right preparation. And then of course, finally, if you haven't already, on our webpage, you can download our lesson plans. These are completely free. It's quite a big booklet because it goes through every single item type. But let me just remind you how these work, and then perhaps what you can do depending on the item type you want to work on. You can simply just print off the pages that are that you want to try out in the classroom at the moment. You certainly don't need to print the whole thing, or maybe you just keep it as a digital format on your computer. But in any case, you'll notice here that step 1, introducing the item type on that first page there, which I believe is the read aloud item. What we do is we give you 3 strategies that you can give your learners to practice this read aloud item. And then what we do in step 3 is we explain and we practice each strategy. So we give you 3 activities to do with your learners in the classroom, which is giving you direct practice of the strategies. Then in step 4, we give you an example of the item type across 4 different levels, and then you use the item type for practice in your lesson. Finally, you give some feedback, and each lesson is anything from, I think, half an hour to 1 hour. So you should have more than enough content there to keep you going. We have an appendix at the back of each lesson plan, and what that has is an example across A2, B1, B2 and C1 levels. So you can use all of them depending on the levels of your class, or you can just access the level that's most appropriate. I wanted to briefly mention as well our Pearson English monthly podcast. If you feel that you want to benefit from this, tuning into some experts from around the world who are discussing recent innovations in the online learning world, exploring educational trends, please do tune in. You just need to search Pearson English podcast, and it will come up on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, and you can go ahead and tune in. I think it's always worth thinking about some additional ideas, things that you can take to the classroom. I think the last one I saw was talking about going back to school and also preparing classes for beginner level students. So check it out. There's bound to be something there across all the episodes that will interest you. Before we get into questions, this is something that's really important actually. So hopefully you've got a good sense of what's available there to support you initially as we go into launching this test and making it available for test takers. The support isn't going to stop there though. A very important part of my job actually is to consider what additional preparatory resources we can make available for you as teachers, whether you're going to be working with learners in a classroom, whether you're going to be working with them remotely. Beyond lesson plans, what else do you think you would like to see from Pearson in order to support you, helping your learners prepare for the test? If you're happy to now, I'd love to see a few examples of some ideas in the chat box. It could be additional materials. It could be an extension of lesson plans. It could be a further webinar series. It could be live FAQs. Be specific. I'm going to leave this open for a minute or two to see if we get anything, because I would love to see it. However, if all of you want to remind them of the international certificate at pearson.com email address, I can leave this question with you. And I would love to hear if you have any specific ideas of a resource or training that we could create to support you in the coming months. I don't know if anything's come up at this point. And it's okay if not, it's absolutely fine. I've put you on the spot.
I'll leave, just to follow up, I'll leave the email address if anyone has any ideas that they would like to share. So it's just, I'm just leaving it in the chat here.
We would love to hear from you.
Yeah. And apologies, I believe some people may have had issues with the presentation being slightly blurry. So apologies for that. Hopefully you were able to see the presentation okay. And we just had 2 or 3 questions that came in. And I just, so I'll just kind of answer or check if you can answer those right now. Yeah. So one of the questions were, are there non-native variations of English included in the exam too? So not just, is it just kind of the American?
That's a very good question. So that is a very good question. My understanding is that, yes, we will use examples of non-native speakers as well, I believe. However, and I'm saying that because that's my familiarity with PT Academic. However, what I'm going to do is verify that. And then we can make that available in our follow-up when we send out the recording. My sense is yes, though.
Okay. And I think just one of the other questions was that just in the listen to the conversation section of the test, would full sentence answer, or would there be full sentence expected, or just 1 or 2 words?
Yeah, good, great question. And sorry if I didn't make that clear enough during it. No, you absolutely do not need to give a full sentence. Just a short, simple answer of a few words will suffice. So in some cases, if it's just envelopes, if that's the answer, that's all they have to say. But I would state that on the screen, it does specify, and you might have noticed that it says just 1 or 2 words are satisfactory. And again, if you access any of the lesson plans or our walkthrough videos, that information is specified as well, so you can signpost it for your learners.
Great. And then I think just kind of lastly, we have, are the questions going to state how many times the candidates can listen to the audios?
So they can only hear it 1 time. The audio will only be heard 1 time. And yes, that will be said, they'll say at the top, you'll just hear this once.
Great. And then,
so it's important when you're practicing in your classes that perhaps initially you may need to give them a couple of attempts to hear it, but when they're getting ready, really gearing up to take that exam, they're only hearing the audio once.
Great. I hope that has answered your question. And then lastly, will we be sending certificates for this webinar? I'm not fully sure myself, so
yeah. So we always send out a certificate of attendance after every session. So yes, in our follow-up email, you will get your certificate of attendance. Yes.
Great. And then, yes, just I think just one or two other questions about the resources, but I'll share that link that we have available for all resources again in the chat and in our Q&A section.
Yeah, and just to make you all aware as well that we will be building out these resources too. So the buck doesn't stop here. As I said, please do contact us on our email address, because I would love to hear how else we can support you as we start to build out our teacher support offer. But in the meantime, please make use of our familiarization guide, the test tips PowerPoint, and also the lesson plans. It's all completely free for you to use. And as well, please also use this email address to get your free readiness test trial. We want you to go ahead and take this test and have the experience. Really is the best way to prepare your learners. So please take advantage of it, because we're not going to be running this offer forever.
Great. Let me just double check. I think that's pretty much. Yeah, and I believe we'll be making, as mentioned, this webinar available on our YouTube, and I'm not sure about the PowerPoint presentation. Well, I think it might be just the YouTube.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, well, thank you so much, Melanie, and thank you everybody for joining. I hope you've enjoyed the webinar and found it helpful.
Thanks so much, everyone.
Yeah, and as I said, please email any questions you have that we haven't answered today to the email address that we've provided.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Bye, everybody.